one of the first questions I asked today, I was really curious as to what do you do for a living, and that brought up this whole interesting point, which I'd like you to explain right now.
Okay.
Is could an everyday person run for this position?
Yes. In fact, the legislature is full of everyday people. This is a citizen legislature. We're not full-time, we're not paid the whole year. I think it's actually more like 4 months, January, February, March, April, and a little bit of May.
And how much are you paid?
You're paid about, it comes out to about $12,000 for that whole thing.
Okay, do the math for the
So,
$600 a month?
After taxes, I get about $1,000 every 2 weeks.
So
now that's
$500.
after my taxes. So 500, 600, and then you do get expenses. And you get expenses based on the federal reimbursement. You get gas, you get food, and you get housing.
Right.
So for someone like me, because I'm the executive director of an environmental group, the Battenkill Watershed Alliance, I don't make that much money. It's a part-time position. For me, the legislature actually is more money than I usually make.
Right.
But if you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a business person, it's less money. And so you're giving something up to do that. And if you are the sole support of your family, that can be significant. Now, what some people have done, I remember there was someone from Bennington who worked from the library. She actually split her job. So she had a full-time job at the library 6 months, and somebody else had it 6 months. The key thing that we were talking about before was that in Vermont, there's a law that if you have a full-time job, and it's not part-time, full-time,
okay,
they have to let you serve in the legislature and come back to your job.
They can't fire you.
They can't fire you.
Can
Okay?
they demote you?
Now that's a gray area. I'm not quite sure how all those things, the details work, but they can't fire you. They have to let you return to your job. And so this is in order to allow people to serve in the legislature. Now there obviously would be things to work out in terms of passing on your work to other people or whatever.
Right.
I had a full-time job that was very seasonal, and it happened that the winter and spring were the slow season, so it worked perfectly, and they let me do it and come back to my job. There are people who have jobs, full-time jobs that have some flexibility, and you can still work on Monday. You're in Montpelier from Tuesday morning to Friday afternoon. Okay. So you still have Monday, that's why I'm here doing the show. On Monday I'm in town, and the weekend, and so I do work for my river group during that time, and so you can still keep some things going. I think it works well for someone who has, like, there's one woman who has a bookkeeping firm.
Yeah.
So she has a couple of people working for her. She can still do things when she's at home, and then she picks up more of the burden during the rest of the year. So that kind of thing, if you're a lawyer and you have partners, there's a doctor that serves in the legislature, and he's actually an OBGYN. So, he's on call, he's delivering babies, and he works so hard over the weekend that when he comes to the legislature, he's like, it's vacation, I just sit here, talk, and vote,
Right.
It's
Right.
like, so, but it
Okay.
is a citizen legislature. We don't have staff. We don't even have offices. We have desks, okay?
Right.
So it is so different from New York or Massachusetts, or based on what I know about them, it is completely different. We are only paid during the session, so when it's the off season, if you go to meetings or whatever, you're not paid for that. That's part of your serving your constituents.
Got it.
So I think it's really important.
And you stay up there?
And I stay
stay
up there. I think most people from this area stay up there. I know that sometimes when if a family member is sick or something, there have been people, and I myself have sometimes gone back and forth the same day, but it's really deadly. You can't do anything else with your day, because you're just driving all the time. But it's really important to think about the people that have served your district, whatever district you're in. Think about them, and we'll hope that you think they did a good job serving you, but they were ordinary people.
Right.
That's what the Vermont legislature is made up of, ordinary people.
Right.
And I think that is a real strength, and we all bring different backgrounds to it. Like there's somebody up there who's like a civil engineer who specializes in water, septic and water and rules like that, and he's on the Fish and Wildlife Committee.
Now, do they penalize you for, not that people would do this, but let's say you're one of those people that don't show up to vote a lot, because I hear that in the news all the time. Are you in any way penalized if you don't show up to work?
Okay.
Do you
This is
punch a card?
No, you don't. This is something that really irritates me. There's a whole system for tracking your expenses. Like I have to file for my expenses every week. So if I miss a day, I'm obviously not going to file for my expenses because I wasn't there.
Right.
And we hope everybody else does that too. Not taking expenses for a day
That's
they
a
weren't
good
there.
point, yeah.
Unless you're renting a room by the month and then you're paying for it whether you're there or not. But the other thing is there's a way to dock your pay. Like if I'm next week, I think I will miss a day because of some other obligations I have. And so I will have my pay adjusted downwards. But not everybody does that. I am aware of representatives who have gone on vacation for a week or more, and they have not. And they've continued to collect their legislative pay. And I think that's absolutely outrageous. And sometimes it shows up in
Now, is
elections, in campaign issues.
You know, I'm going to
Yes.
follow up with a question.
Yes.
So is that legal?
Yeah, it appears to be legal because apparently it's up to the representative to make those decisions. And I wouldn't, and if somebody was sick and they missed a day, I wouldn't,
Right.
I won't. But when you go away for a week or so, there was a representative who went away for 3 weeks, continued to collect his legislative pay, and in the next campaign, it was used against him, and he lost.
Interesting.
So clearly not a good idea. First of all, for moral and ethical reasons,
Right.
and second
Right.
of all, for practical political reasons. But I make a real effort to be very careful about those things because I think this is all taxpayer dollars, and if I'm not there doing the work, I should.
But if I had a sick child and I had to take a week off, that's a whole different thing.
That's a different thing. I still
It
think a
wouldn't be
week is a
frowned
lot.
on.
If it was a day or so, but
Yeah.
there's nobody enforcing this.
Right.
It's up to
It's an honor
to-
system.
it's an honor system. It's up to you and your judgment. I think the parties might, point out to people, you want to be careful about it because it's public
Right.
knowledge.
Right.
So-
Now, quickly before we get
Yeah,
to what's on
yeah.
the table with you, so are there Republican and Democratic police that sort of check in with you and say, so where were you on the vote, or?
Well, there's one thing. A lot of the votes in the House are voice votes. There's nothing controversial, and everybody goes aye or nay, and
Gotcha.
there's nothing on record. But there are a lot of votes that are roll calls, and that's when you are officially on the record, and you can look up all the roll call votes and see how people voted. Now, I work really hard not to miss those votes, and even when it's a really hard vote and to know how to vote and what's the right vote, I'm always there. I don't duck votes. But last week, I was downstairs in a Senate committee, the Senate Education Committee, testifying about one of my proposals about how to change Act 46.
Right.
And the roll call bell goes off, and I knew what it was. I knew it was going to pass. It was something I cared about. I would have wanted to vote it, but I wasn't going to leave that Senate committee. Because,
Right.
you leave
Right.
and the senators are like, oh, and then they go on to something else. You come back, and they're like, oh, we're done with that.
Right.
So I did not leave. So I missed that vote. So if you look
But
up
you
the
knew it
roll
was
calls.
safe.
Well, the thing is, I'd already voted on other aspects of the bill, so I'm on record on certain aspects of the bill, but I will be counted as absent for that roll call vote. But I didn't duck it. I was just doing something that I thought was really dominant in terms of priority for my constituents. But that's the only reason I would knowingly take a vote. However, sometimes people do something that's called taking a walk. And that's when there's a roll call vote on something and their caucus may feel this is really important, you have to vote for this. And like if they're the chair of the committee or someone
Yeah.
in leadership, they're supposed to vote. This is the Democrats. This is what I'm part of. And the Democrats are the majority, and they're the ones that are really enforcing things.
You're following the party line.
I'm not, but
they want you to at that
They
moment.
want you to. And so if you're the chair, you're supposed to be loyal to the party, even when you disagree with it, or even if it's bad for your district. So sometimes they will give you a lifeboat and let you vote no
Right.
because it's for your district. And sometimes you just take a walk. And so there'll be somebody that was there all day, and then all of a sudden they're absent. And then they're, and it's because they took a walk. And whether they went home or whether they just left the building, so
There could be a little business up there where they just do T-shirts and have all these little sayings that are always in, like "Take a walk" T-shirt.
well, they actually do.
We should go to here.
We do,
'cause
yeah, we should.
Before
We
you
should.
know it, we're going to be out of time.
Yes, we
with
are.
you.
Yes, we are. Okay.
Well, maybe you should do that. Start a line of T-shirts. Just sell them up there.
Well, I shouldn't even bring this up, but the legislature does a cabaret night where they put on skits and they raise money for a nonprofit. And I actually think this is really inappropriate, and I don't participate. I went to it once, and I decided I'm not doing this, and I'm not even going to it. But they do all kinds of skits and things like taking a walk or all those other kinds of stuff will come up in the skits. They make fun of themselves.
We could film that.
No, you couldn't.
Nor would you want to. All right, what do you got on the table for us?
Okay.
What's the big
All right,
thing that's bugging you or piss you off or make you happy?
Well, let's just frame the rest of the session because this is being taped
And
on.
the session ends?
This is being taped. We're taping this on April 18th.
Right.
The Speaker of the House has said that he's hoping that the session will be done Saturday, May 7th. Now, usually what they do is they set a deadline, and as with many deadlines, there's slippage.
Push and
But
push.
he knows that. He's trying to push people to finish their work. Now, people need to understand that the only things that really have to pass are the budget
Right.
and the tax bill, because those are the bills that raise the revenue
Keep the
to run the
system
state
moving.
and that spend the money to keep the system going.
Right.
There are many other bills that people care about. There's the marijuana legalization issue. There's the siting of solar and other renewable panels. And there's some kind of technical things about classifying workers that people care about.
Right.
And, so there's other things that are in the mix, but they don't have to pass. So what happens is you start to have this strategic struggle between the House and the Senate, where the House has the renewable energy siting bill, and the Senate wants that bill to pass in some form. So the House can just say, well, we're not moving on it until you pass this other bill that we want.
Now, let me ask you a quick question. Of those two major bills that need to be passed, is there an understanding that at all costs we should have those done by the May deadline, and that if there's time to take up other things, we can do that too? So do they all get together and say, let's pass the two major ones first, or it's not possible to do that?
It isn't, it would be, it's totally possible to do that, but they won't do that, because those are the two bills. Since they have to pass,
Right.
that's where you have the maximum leverage. Both of those bills are now in the Senate. Those are money bills, so they start in the House.
Right.
Just like in Washington, the money bills start in the most representative body. So those bills have gone from the House to the Senate. So the Senate has both of those bills. And when those bills pass, then you can stop. But you can't stop till those bills pass. So those are the bills that are being, so if we want something in the spending bill, the Senate is going to say, we're not going to pass that until you pass the solar siting bill. So they're doing this,
Right.
this war. And this is because we have two houses in the legislature. Now, people may not know that Vermont started out with one house, and the House of Representatives, and it was seen as perhaps too volatile or too close to the people or too subject to,
Yeah.
passions and things like that. So the House, to my infinite regret, deliberately created the Senate. What a big mistake. Okay, because what it does is it sets up all this dynamics. When you have bills
Yes.
between the two bodies that are different, then they have a conference committee to work out the differences.
Right.
You can end up with a bill that has things in it that neither house supported. And I don't like that. So all the power is actually in who's on those conference committees, and that's determined by the Speaker of the House and the President
Okay.
pro tem and so on. So Nebraska is the only state that has one house,
Right.
unicameral, and that would be better because then all the responsibility is in one place, and you can't get this undemocratic, small d democratic kind of power broker.
So we should go to
Yes,
this, but
yes.
who stops this May, okay, now we're going to go to May 16th, okay, now we're going to June 1st. I mean, how do these people, if they're having trouble agreeing,
Okay, the problem is
who shuts them up?
Okay, one thing is that the legislature has appropriated, in last year's budget bill, there was a certain amount of money appropriated to finance the cost of the legislature. If you start going
I
into
see.
May,
You'd-
you're having to do, I mean, I think there's
It's for
1 week
free.
in May. No, you'd have to do it for free, or you'd have to appropriate more money. So ultimately, that is the thing that, and boy, you don't want to do either of those things.
Right.
I mean, I actually couldn't afford to work very long for free, and
Smart.
you wouldn't want to have to
So the money
appropriate more money.
vanishes.
So that deadline
Yeah, okay.
is the thing that gets people's attention. And so that's why when the speaker says that, he knows that's when the money is going to, it's like 16 weeks or something,
Right.
and the money's going to run out. And so at that time, all this stuff has to be done because they don't want to go on.
So just in the years, one last thing, just
Yeah.
in the years where it stretched, did the House and the Senate, did they find it very easy to give themselves money to keep going? Or
It
did
has
they all
never
agree they
happened.
should?
It has never happened. No, it's never happened while I've been there. It's my recollection that some 10 or 15 years ago, they actually had to have a special section in June, whether it was because the governor vetoed a budget or
Right.
some disagreement. I mean,
Okay.
and then it costs money to bring everybody back.
Got it.
So,
Okay. All right. So they agreed to pay themselves to come back.
Yes.
Well, that was
Yes.
nice. That's good.
Yes. Well,
So, but generally, we're not seeing them do that a lot.
No,
They-
you wouldn't
that's
want to
kinda
do that.
cool.
You'd want to. I mean, you had 5 minutes to see. The other thing is some of the posturing. It's really a charade. It's really like kabuki dancing or something. It's shadow gestures because the House and the Senate, the committees have been working on it. They've been working on the same things. They've been in touch. The Speaker and the Senate Pro Tem are in touch. Everybody knows what the outline of a deal is. It's just a question of arm wrestling to settle the details.
Trade-offs. and
So
stuff like that.
so it's there's a lot that's really set, and that rank and file like me don't have a lot of influence on, but it's just this strategic process of making deals, and that's what they're doing as this to get votes on committees and other
Okay.
kinds of stuff.
You better go back to that.
Okay, all right. So let me just talk about something. This is a little technical, but I think it could really matter to many Vermonters. The House Commerce and Economic Development Committee has been working on a bill about the classification of workers. Now that sounds like, whoa, going to sleep here. But it's actually really important because what you have to provide for a worker is different if they're classified as your employee versus if it is classified that you're hiring an independent contractor.
And this is all coming about because my understanding is that a lot of businesses across the country were calling everyone
Right.
independent contractors.
Even when they really weren't.
Even when they were there full time,
Right.
had been there for
Right,
years.
Right, and they got no benefits and they all this
Right.
kind of stuff. So and yet at the same time, there are some industries where people really are independent contractors.
Right.
As we go forward into like the gig economy or the IT
Yeah.
economy, some people really may be, freelancers who come and may work for a while.
Isn't
but
that the
there's-
fight with Uber right now?
Yeah, and that's
Right?
one of the
'Cause their
things
drivers,
with Uber.
they
That's
were
right.
trying to-
See, there's lots of
Right.
issues in the digital economy, the gig economy. There's all kinds of issues. But it's a question. When I hire a roofing contractor to put on a roof,
Right.
clearly they're an independent contractor. They are not my employee. I'm just hiring them to
Yes.
put on the roof.
Right.
But when they hire somebody else to do stuff for them, suppose I hire a specialist to do the flashing around the chimney or whatever, is that also an independent contractor? And under what circumstances, if they worked for a year, always doing the same thing,
Yeah.
if they were, I think that it comes down to things like, does the business, the employer, control what the worker does? In terms of when they show up, what is
Yes.
their tasks,
Right.
There's all these kinds of criteria. If you're an independent contractor, you may be given certain tasks, but you decide when you're going to do them, how you're going to do them.
I could go home right now
I
if I
could
was
go
an
home
independent
and then take
contractor.
care of the work later.
Right.
So, but the problem is that if you classify someone as an independent contractor, you're not going to pay unemployment insurance on them. You're not going to pay workers' comp. You're not going to be giving them benefits, and that's all going to be fine. But at what point does that become abusive to workers, and do you end up with a whole class of workers who don't have workers' comp, who don't
Right.
have unemployment insurance? So where's the right way to balance it? So this committee is trying to work
So wait,
out-
let's break it down even more.
Yeah.
So let's use me as an example. Let's
Okay.
say that I was hired here as an independent contractor.
Right,
So if I got hurt on the job,
right.
would GNAT have to pay to have me get better, or would it come out of my own pocket?
Well, it depends. It's my understanding that if they were able to say you're an independent contractor and say we're not going to pay workers' comp on you, then you would be on your own if you got hurt. Now, as it happens, in Vermont specifically, even though you say I'm an independent contractor, Vermont will still say you still have to have workers' comp. I know
By the way,
that.
I'm not an independent contractor.
No.
We're just using it. And I should say we're going to see if Steve's going to make it. We don't know if he's going to make it, but that's why we have a chair for him. He may make it, he may not.
That's right.
Okay, so if I was an independent contractor working at GNAT, I wouldn't get any health benefits.
Right, you
no
get no
dental,
health.
no
Now, of
nothing
course,
like
you
that.
could go to the health insurance exchange
And
now
get my
and
own.
get your own. So that gives more flexibility. But you'd have no retirement, you'd have no unemployment insurance. So if you lost your job, you'd have no way
Right.
to do that. So there's all kinds of issues.
Let me ask you one more.
Yeah.
So Okay, so I wouldn't get any unemployment.
Yeah.
I'd get no health benefits.
Right. No retirement.
What about overtime?
I think that would depend. I don't think you would. It would depend on the terms of your contract, but I don't think you would.
Are
I don't
most
think you
are
would.
most people? Is this an independent? So okay, so we'll keep it an independent contractor. So an independent contractor, even though let's say was working here 40 hours a week, I would not get overtime either. So
I don't know for sure, but I don't think so. It would
Okay.
depend on the terms of your contract, because you could have a contract that was written
Right.
if you work more than 40 hours. But the key thing here
Okay,
is
so
that
now let's go on with that.
people are concerned. There's all these different things to balance. People are concerned that employers, businesses, are exploiting workers by
Right.
treating them as independent contractors and not giving them benefits and not paying into unemployment insurance and workers' comp.
Right,
On the other side, people who want to be independent contracts, who want to have that kind of flexibility, feel constrained if the rules are too tight. So the Commerce Committee has been trying to come up with new rules to suit the way that our economy is evolving. You don't have as many people who are in unionized jobs that where you're clearly a worker. You have all these people with digital skills, computer work, and it needs to be more flexible. So they've been working on how to jigger these definitions to create more flexibility. But what they have done is something that businesses really like, but the unions don't like. So the
Okay.
unions have sort of forced the bill back into the committee, and they're trying to find what's called the sweet spot, where they
Can
have
you
a
tell
balance.
us what that conflict? Can you explain
It's
that?
about
Now, you don't
how
have a lot
tight,
of time, so
right. It's about how tight those definitions are. In other words, how tight. What are the criteria you have to meet to be an independent contractor? Like if I am working on my employer's premises, does that mean I'd have to be a worker by definition?
For 50
or could I
weeks
still,
out of the
right?
year.
That would be a very tight. That would be saying if you're working here, you're a worker. You're not an independent contractor. That would be very tight, and the businesses wouldn't like that. But if you said that, if you said something like, if you have control of your time, you're an independent contractor. Well, the workers wouldn't like that, because there might be situations where you really are still an employee even though you have control over what you do. So this is what they're struggling. This is a political struggle to come up with some kind of compromise. I don't think they're going to make it because it's so late. This bill hasn't even gone through the Senate. So if it was going to come out,
Right.
it would have to be attached to something else, which happens. But I think what they're going to have to do is to come back next year and start over. But I think it's a very important issue. Vermonters' rights have to be protected, but we have to have enough flexibility in our economy so that people can do things a new way. Things evolve. And so that's why I think this is an important issue. But it is kind of technical.
So we probably won't see anything happening this year.
Nothing surprises me
and-
anymore. It might suddenly pop out.
And are there any? You may not know this. Are there any laws in the books right now where if you feel like you're being abused?
Oh yeah.
Can
Department
you-
of Labor. You can file a
So
complaint.
you go to
Absolutely.
the Department of Labor?
Absolutely.
But
If-
doesn't that lead automatically to you getting fired?
I think there are also
mean-
rules about retaliation. It's certainly not something you should do lightly, and you should definitely investigate the situation before you file the public complaint.
Right.
I would.
And most of the reason to classify everybody as an independent contractor is really to save money.
That's why a business might want to do it, but it also might give them access to talent they wouldn't have otherwise. If they want someone to come in temporarily, that talent doesn't want to work for them full time, wants to do a lot of
Right.
other kinds of things. So that's why we need to have flexibility. Businesses have to meet their responsibilities,
Right.
but we have to have flexibility so that people who want to be independent contractors, who are not being abused or exploited, can do it.
Now, how does this compare to the concept of a temporary worker?
That's
Like when you go away for the 5 months to the thing, I could
somebody hired a temp
I
to
could hire a
replace you.
temp,
Yeah.
or I could hire an independent contractor.
It all depends. I mean, we're getting into this question of definitions and classifications, and
Right.
I'm getting out of my depth because I'm not on this
Yeah.
committee and I don't know all the ins and outs. But I think people may have heard about things like I believe that FedEx, their drivers are seen as independent contractors where they
Right.
own their truck and they own their route
Right.
and all this. And UPS, those are unionized workers. So right there, those are companies we're aware of, and they're doing things in a different way. That's what the issue is.
And before we leave this, again, you don't
Yeah.
have to say you know it, but a temporary worker, if I hire a temporary worker, do I still have to do all the things I would with a full-time? I don't have to offer them health benefits unless they're over a certain number of hours.
No, you don't have to offer them health benefits.
Unemployment
In terms of
insurance?
the other things, I don't think so, but we're out of my depth because I
Yeah.
don't do this a lot. But I don't think you'd have to do the other things. See, one of the issues here...
So you see what I'm curious about?
Yes, yes.
Is like
when is a temporary worker
if
an
I'm
independent
if I'm a
employee?
boss,
Right.
why would I even get near
Right.
an independent contractor when I could just call you a temporary worker? And
But I think there are criteria
gotta
for
be
that
something
too.
there,
There's
right?
criteria for that
yeah,
too.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. What
So
else you got?
we'll go on to that. Okay, another thing that people might be interested in is there's a bill about regulating renewable energy and where industrial renewable energy facilities are located. So that would be an industrial scale wind tower
The big ones
situation.
we're talking about?
Yes, we're talking about the big ones. We're talking about 5, 10, 15, really huge scale, not one on somebody's barn.
Like they have in the Cape.
Like they have in the Cape and like they have in a couple places up north. And then also solar farms. And we know there was an issue down in Bennington about several solar farms. And there
Pownell, Green Mountain.
Pownell, and also we can see them in Rutland and everything. And again, we're not talking about small installations. We're talking about really, really big.
Right.
Now, these facilities are very important in terms of generating renewable energy, and I think most Vermonters support them in concept. But it's also very important to balance where they're sited so that we're taking into account environmental damage or damage to people's health or their property values. And again, this is about the industrial scale, the really big ones.
Okay, so let me stop you there. So this is addressing a problem. So the problem is right now?
The problem right now is that in the push to site these facilities, many Vermonters, not all, many Vermonters feel that permits have been provided for industrial renewable facilities that damage the environment, damage people's habitat, their homes, their comfort, their health, and were just not done right. The industrial facilities don't have to go through Act 250. They don't have to abide by local zoning. See, the state deliberately took the regulation of these things out of those two processes. In Vermont, Act 250 is one of the key reasons why we've been able to protect as much of our environment as we have. And they took it out of that.
So let me put this in real terms. So you're saying where I live in Sandgate, so this one of these big companies could move in and buy up 100 acres
Yes.
and just put it there and could basically say to the town, piss off, you can't say yes or no to this.
Yes.
Whereas a developer that wanted to build 4 or 5 homes, he would have to go through all these things to ask, in a sense, permission.
Exactly. Okay. And now a developer doing this would probably work with the community and try to, get their support and probably say, look, the property taxes and all, try to, so they would be, if they had any sense, they would be doing that. Yeah. But that's the thing that really gets me. In Arlington, I know for sure, I don't know as much about it, but Sandgate, but in Arlington, you can't build anything above 1,200 feet. Nothing except maybe a deer camp or a temporary logging facility or something like that. And yet,
so those two houses are right beneath that line.
Yes, that's right. Exactly, they are. Oh no, they totally are. They're just like right there.
There's 2 houses
Absolutely.
recently built.
Very high up on the mountain, 1,200 feet. No, I know. I was on the planning commission. It's met the rule. But the key thing is that the state has removed any local power or say over these facilities. And that's wrong. See, again, we have this question of balance. That's wrong.
But why did they do that?
They did that for a number of reasons. One is many people really believe that climate change is real and that we need to take action to stop it. And I think climate change is real. I think we need to reduce our emissions. But I think we need to be balanced. You don't want to destroy part of the environment in the name of saving it. And that's what they've done with the wind tower facilities, the industrial ones. So many people sincerely believe they're doing the right thing. We have to have as much renewable energy as we can to get off fossil fuels. Right. Now, I think that's a good thing, but I want to do it in a balanced way. Balance. Think about the center of balance, how if you get off of your center of balance, when you're on a bicycle or something, you're going to fall over. And I think that's one of the things that we are constantly struggling with policy and legislation in Vermont. It's true about the classification bill. What's the right balance under new conditions? Right. It's true about renewable energy siting. What's the right balance between the goal of the entire state to have more renewable energy generated,
Okay.
and the rights of property owners to enjoy their property. There's actually a right, what is it? It's like you have the right to the quiet enjoyment of your property. If you're living next to a wind farm, you don't have that. So, so what's the right balance? And I think the state has gone too far in that direction, and I think it needs to come back. I'm not saying towns should necessarily have a veto over things, but I think we should be more cautious about environmental damage. We should have the towns engaged in a meaningful way.
Right.
And I think one thing that's happening now is that they're looking towards, okay, let's prioritize putting solar farms, over parking lots, or in brownfields, or on the top of factories, or instead of going out and you've got a wonderful farm field and you put it there, or you put windmills up. I mean, let's try to use areas that are already developed rather than pristine undeveloped areas. Let's provide distance between people and these facilities.
Well, would you be okay with fields that can't be seen? Like in Sandgate, there's a couple of fields in Sandgate that you would not know there if you didn't know the back road to get to it.
I'm not really, I myself personally am not as concerned about aesthetics as some people are. I think either the windmills or the solar panels, they're part of generating electricity, and if we want electricity, we're going to have those. I personally am really concerned about environmental damage. When you build windmills on the top of a mountain, you damage the headwaters of all the streams. Can you imagine what that would do to the tributaries of the Green River and the Battenkill? All the sediment, all the pollution, all the runoff. No, you can't do that and say you're a good environment. You can't do that. Yeah. And so they lost their balance. They lost their way. They lost their balance. And so I want to have more accountability, more restraint. I know some people are really offended by the sight of either windmills or panels. I'm not so much. Yeah, but I also think if you've got, I think there was a place where there was a historic downtown village, and someone wanted to take a field right next to the village and put in all those solar panels, and people were like, because it's like, if you think of in Sandgate near the old schoolhouse and the town,
that field
would you really want? Maybe that'd be okay, but the community should have something to say about it. But again, to me, the really important thing is, the one in Bennington, one of the projects in Bennington that I think the permit was denied for, they were going to cut down a forest to put up the solar panel. Now the trees are taking in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. The trees are a natural carbon sink to offset emissions. Right. So that doesn't make sense. But see, there's all these federal and state tax credits that mean that the developers are chasing tax credits to do this.
So is the state pushing back against this?
The state does not want towns to have more power. They don't want to have restrictive noise standards for winds. They don't want the towns to have more power. In the Senate bill, it ended up being that a town plan would be given substantial deference by the Public Service Board.
Gotcha.
If the town plan was in compliance with the criteria of the regional plan, which is set by the state. So in other words, we'll pay attention to your plan if it has what we want in it. So that's not the town's having any power at all. And also, what is substantial deference? That's
So the state set up a system where these big companies could just sort of ramrod their way into these towns and get it done. So the idea is that you sort of have to talk to people first before you do this.
It shouldn't be that you just have to talk. The towns should have real power. Not in the bills. The bill that passed the Senate and that's currently in the side, in the House, I don't think it's strong enough. I don't think it's going to be strong enough. I think it would be nice to pass something that makes things better. It may not be good enough for me, but that makes things better. But remember, this is a bill. It doesn't have to pass. But then if it doesn't pass and nothing is done, then it's a campaign issue. So the question is, will they pass something that looks like it does something? Right. So then they kind of, what would you call,
who would change this law? It would be
the legislature.
The legislature, right? So the fact that it exists tells me that a majority of legislators like it, or they've just got other things on their mind.
Well, it's interesting because a majority of legislatures can vote for something, and then later on it turns out it doesn't work quite the way they thought. For instance, many people who would tend to support renewable energy are very upset about that natural gas pipeline in Addison County, which is fossil fuels. So then you're sort of like, well, maybe towns should have more power. Like, so all these people who probably supported the Public Service Board doing this are now having second thoughts.
Right.
So you have this back and forth in terms of you do something to solve one problem, and then you can have unintended effects and new problems, and so you have to change it. This is natural. This is
It's how it works,
the human
really.
process works.
Because you can't know.
Because you can't
You
always
can't.
know. Now, actually, sometimes people said, "Oh, this is not a good idea to do," and they did it anyway. But you know, it's.
But
there's a
those
lot
are the
of tension.
people that would have probably said no anyways, because they
But-
don't want
but
Vermont
no,
to change
the
it anyway.
the other thing you have to see about any of these systems is it really matters who's doing it. You know, I don't want to get too intense and political, but
Yeah, you've only got 20 minutes.
okay, I'll just make one more comment on this, and we'll go on to this, to something else. The Shumlin administration has been a big booster of windmills and solar, and they actually worked very closely with Green Mountain Power, our power company,
Right.
and Green Mountain Power did this big wind facility in the Northeast Kingdom.
And they had to because they
worked
were worried
way-
about the,
no.
the nuclear plant being shut down. Wasn't there a big
No,
worry
that
there
didn't
for a
replace
while?
the nuclear plant. I mean, the
No, but-
fact that there's enough electricity.
But let me ask you, did that trigger a worry in the state that we
I think
needed to
that-
make sure we were getting power from somewhere?
Yeah, but we already had contracts with Hydro-Quebec for hydropower.
For
We were
years.
covered.
We were
the
safe.
wind power didn't do that much. Didn't contribute that much. But the thing is, there was this whole nexus of Green Mountain Power and Shumlin and the renewable energy sort of zealots, as I would call them, to do this project. And Mary Powell of Green Mountain Power gave money. You know, she did Governor Shumlin's first inauguration. There was really tight, close political. It was just, and they gave permits for those windmills. The Agency of Natural Resources that I don't believe met the criteria for those permits. I think it was a political process. So the Shumlin administration, and this is my personal opinion, I think it's been full of the public getting too close to private corporations.
Got it.
And the public should always be leaning away private corporations. You want to provide a good economic context, the infrastructure, but you don't get so close to private corporations. So I think that in the renewable energy thing, the Shumlin administration did that, and now we just see this development up in the Northeast Kingdom that's just exploding with fraud,
Yes.
and the Shumlin administration got too close to
Yeah.
it. So this is a fault with this particular governor and his administration, and I'm very hopeful that in the future we may have a more even-handed, good government, arm's length kind of thing. But
Okay.
that's just a hope.
All right.
That's a hope.
You
Okay.
better go to your next thing.
Okay.
Whew, you want a drink of water after that?
No,
Okay.
I think I'd like to talk about education, but I actually think people are probably more interested in marijuana. So let's talk about marijuana.
Yes.
The marijuana bill passed the Senate. See, this again is part of this little dance between the House and the Senate. The marijuana bill passed the Senate. It legalized marijuana and set up, you'd have to get a license to grow it and sell it. You couldn't grow your own. It would be businesses doing this.
Right.
It would be regulated, taxed, and we'd use some of the money for law enforcement and prevention. So that's what the Senate passed, and it came to the House. The House is very nervous in general about marijuana because the marijuana legalization, not that we don't understand the issues with people are already using it and the other kinds of problems with substances, but it's illegal at the federal level, and that's still true. And even though these experiments are happening elsewhere, that creates a really weird kind of status in terms of the businesses not being able to use banks. If a state collects too much in tax revenue or doesn't regulate the industry properly, the feds can actually confiscate your tax revenue. All of these experiments are taking place under a memorandum from one assistant attorney general. When the administration in Washington changes, that may all change. So many of us are nervous about, and the health commissioner has testified that about the very serious effects of marijuana for young people who, of course, no one wants to have it, but even for people in their 20s, but definitely
Does
for
he
young
drink?
people. I have no idea. But see, those are actually two separate issues. Alcohol is already legal, and we still have problems with it.
We always
If
will.
we do legalization of marijuana, we have to do it right because we're not going to be able to reverse it.
Right.
So I think the people in the House, given law enforcement and health professionals and educators testifying against it, they're very nervous. So right now, the Judiciary Committee in the House has passed a bill that would study it and decriminalize possession of a larger amount. I think it's half an ounce now, it would be an ounce. I mean, one thing I should say is Vermont already has medical marijuana. Okay, we already have that.
Yeah.
So if you need marijuana for a health condition, you can get a prescription from your doctor and you can purchase marijuana at a dispensary. we already have decriminalized possession of a certain amount.
So let's talk about
So-
that. What
so
does
if,
that mean?
what that means is suppose someone is caught with one joint,
Yeah.
and that would be less than half an ounce, I'm guessing. They would get a civil fine. No crime, no arrest,
So
nothing
why
on your
are we
record.
trying to raise money?
Production, but you see, it's a kind of a weird half-assed
why
kind of
even do
thing.
that? Why-
Well, see, that's the question: is why do we need to legalize? Well,
I should
remember,
say that
people-
I'm pro this
That's
issue.
right, that's
so
right.
I'm,
And
I'm
people-
just playing devil's advocate.
If
too.
you're going to decriminalize possession of small amounts for personal use, you're still prosecuting the dealers. The problem is people are buying and using something they don't really know what's in it.
Right, no,
It's
I
feeding
agree.
organized crime. You know, so it's a real.
I would
it's a
rather
real
have it
problem.
all transparent, upfront,
If
legal,
you could
controlled.
do it, if you could do it right, if you could do it
But I
right,
think
and
we
the House,
can.
I think we might, but I don't think the Senate got it right. And so what's happened?
But we can't even do this. And what you're really saying, I mean, I think there's two issues going on. The Fed still has to, at some
the
point,
feds have to change.
They have
if
to
the
change.
feds change, I am.
Because then there might be a second battle where people
Absolutely.
go, you know, I like drinking, but I don't like smoking. So I've grown up with drinking. I'm comfortable about it, but I'm not sure I'm comfortable with smoking. So I still think there's a secondary battle here that's being hidden under the guise of, because the Fed's still screwing around on the
Right,
issue. So
right.
until the Fed stops screwing around, I
Right.
totally understand why we would sit there and go, not going to do it yet.
Well, and also you could even justify, let's see how things go. Let's learn more from Colorado and Washington
Yeah.
and what they got right, what they got wrong.
Yeah.
For instance, the whole edibles issue is, you know, in terms
Yeah.
of the intensity of some of those and hard to regulate and keeping away from children. There's all kinds of issues. So that one House committee passed a bill that really just decriminalized more and said we're going to study it more.
Are they still
And
trying to
then-
raise money from it,
let
though?
me finish. So that's the first committee. Now it's in the Ways and Means
Gotcha.
committee,
Okay.
and they have done a bill that allows people to grow 2 plants, but doesn't allow anything else and doesn't tax it or anything. The Senate bill taxed it. The problem with all of this is that you really need to set up a whole regulatory structure before you have any of the tax revenue. And of course, the budget
Yeah.
is so tight we have no money for this. So the House is now doing something drastically different from the Senate. So the question is, if the House bill comes to the House floor, what happens to it? And if these 2 bills go to conference committee, what happens?
Could take months.
Well, it's going to run out of time. But what will happen if the House doesn't pass something and it goes to conference committee, then what will probably happen is the Senate will attach the marijuana bill to the budget.
Interesting.
And then it would come back to the House, and the House would take it off, and the Senate would say, well, we're not doing, you know. So it might benefit the House to have its own version in play.
Something
See, there's all
that's-
this strategic
Right,
stuff.
something that's not, obviously, they want something different.
Yeah.
They don't want something so close to the Senate, but
Right.
if they go too far into the woods,
Right.
then the Senate's going to get pissed off.
Right, and then there's a question of what could actually pass the House floor and what kind of amendments would be offered. And the Speaker of the House, Shep Smith, he really likes to control things, and he doesn't like to bring bills to the floor if he doesn't know what's going to happen and if he doesn't know he has the votes. Now, that doesn't mean he wouldn't do this, but there would end up being all kinds of amendments saying complete legalization and setting a tax rate, and you'd
Right.
have an amendment setting a tax rate on the floor of the House. You can't do that. So it's a really big question mark. What's going to happen to this bill as it goes through the House?
And that's
then-
basically because the House went so far in another direction.
Yeah,
if they
and
had
that's-
stayed close together, we might
But see, the
have
thing-
something that
But
means
the thing is,
something.
the House members are representing their constituents. And remember, senators have these big districts,
Mm-hmm.
and House members have specific districts, and they're pretty close touch with people. In terms of our district on that Doyle poll, you know, that
Yeah,
survey at town
yeah.
meeting, it was 50-50.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, and that's reflects what I'm hearing from people. So to me, I think the question is to do it really well and to do it properly. And the Senate bill doesn't have that, and the House bill doesn't have that. And it seems like a complete cop-out to say, well, you have to study it some more, but sometimes you do. We're not going to be able to undo this.
Right.
So if we do this right. And I don't see, if we don't do it now, we can come back to it next year. I'd rather do it right than do it in a way that makes marijuana. I mean, one of the things that's funny about what the House Ways and Means did is they made it legal to have your own 2 plants. And so instead of having it over here controlled, now they're right there in the household. How are you keeping it away from kids? It's right there in the household.
Well, the same way you do with alcohol. But the bottom line is it doesn't stop the black market, which is which is
no,
the big problem.
and that's one of the things you'd want because now you still have the black market for heroin or other kinds of things, but you really would want to do something that stopped the black market because that is feeding organized crime.
Right.
It's making criminals of people who are otherwise law-abiding people.
Do we have a black market for booze?
I don't believe so.
Right, so pretty much when it became legal and controlled, the black market vanished for booze.
But I think it's easier to grow marijuana plants than it is to make alcohol in terms of distilling. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
I
know.
wouldn't go there unless you know.
I mean, I
'Cause
think that...
I think a lot of people on this issue go to places that they don't know about.
Right, and we do have this whole study by the Rand Corporation that is really, really fascinating. And all of the issues that I've raised in terms of, well, what about this, what about this, those are from that study.
Yeah.
They brought up all of these different issues.
Yeah.
Another big issue, what about employers? Can they test, because you can, right now, you can do drug testing, and if someone has marijuana, you can say, that's it. Is that not going to be true now? So if you're running a heavy equipment company and you have people using excavators, you can't drug test them? You know, if
Do we
it's
do that
illegal,
with booze?
no, but booze doesn't stay in your body as long.
Well, let me ask you this. I can
understand.
understand. I think booze stays in your body for, I was reading about it, I don't get my facts here right, 2.5 days.
And I know you can fire someone if they
can
come to the
detect
job drunk.
alcohol
I mean,
in
it's
your body.
easier, but also if someone is not functional and
You
drunk,
get what
you
I'm
can fire.
getting at.
I do.
What I'm
and
getting
see, there's
at
all
is
these
that
issues. What's the balance?
is that there
What's the
seems to be
balance?
two groups of people. There's a group of people that says just say no to everything.
Right.
Then there's a group of people that drink. Then there's a group of people that smoke. And there's some crossover, but there's these two groups.
And then we haven't even
right
gotten
now the
into
group
the
that
drugs,
controls
the
is the
driving
people
safety.
that drink. Like, are there parties up in the Capitol? Do you go to parties? Are people holding drugs in their hands called alcohol?
People in Montpelier, I think probably drink about the same as other people.
So they use drugs.
In Vermont. They use substances. They use nicotine and they use alcohol, and I'll bet some of them do use marijuana.
I bet a lot of them
The
do.
question is,
And
I
I'm for
personally
control.
don't think people should rely on chemicals to live their lives. I think we should be very careful
and
about
we
what's...
all
let
agree
me
with
finish.
that. But we all agree with
Right.
that.
But the question is, with this other substance of marijuana, if we're going to legalize it, we have to do it in the right way.
And we agree with that.
And I don't think either the Senate or the House has the right way. And one of the problems is that everything gets so compromised and so distorted by the political process, it no longer makes sense.
Right.
And so I feel as if we need to have, if this is going to happen, some strong leader has to provide a coherent intellectual framework
I like
for
that.
how to do this. And I haven't seen
and
that.
I agree with you. Don't
I
get me
haven't
wrong.
seen that.
I'm
and
just saying,
I'm not close to it, but right now, nothing I have seen has overcome my concern about highway safety. It's illegal at the federal level and protecting children.
yeah, and I agree with that. We all,
But it's a work
we
in
all
process.
agree.
This, if we do not do it this session, the issue will come back. So for those who are opposed to it, you need to think about what could you support and how to do it right. For those who are supporting it, they need to think about how can we do it right in a more responsible
And I have
way.
to say that I think we've dealt with alcohol because I served that drug for years.
I know you, that's right.
Right.
That's
so
right.
I am intimately aware of both of these drugs.
Right.
And I know the drug alcohol is very powerful and
That's
very
right.
dangerous.
That's right.
And I know, I've seen more people beat their wives.
Right. Oh, domestic
alcohol,
violence,
on alcohol
absolutely.
than I have never seen
Absolutely.
someone beating his wife after he had a joint. So for me,
Right, but if he gets in his car, that's
well, but what I'm saying is we're not stupid people in Vermont. We have worked on alcohol, this drug, for many, many years. We've got the drug down pretty good. It's not perfect, but we've got it. I think we can take all of our learning and now apply it to pot. And my hope is that if we as a society are going to use drugs, I would rather us use a drug like marijuana rather than a drug like alcohol, where I've seen more people take their knives out under the drug alcohol than I've ever seen under the drug marijuana. I would love to see our society, if we are going to have a drug, shift to a less aggressive drug. But we are a war society. So if you're going to have a drug, I mean, what drug as a war society should we have?
Well, again,
Hold that thought. You only got 6 minutes, Cynthia.
Okay, I think I would prefer a society in which people thought a lot about how they spend their time and their energy in terms of investing in their capacities, investing in their communities. Any of these substances, in fact, you could even go to caffeine or chocolate, nicotine,
cheeseburgers,
alcohol, fat, sugar, all of these substances,
Yeah.
marijuana, these substances in moderation probably have a role in human lives. I mean, over centuries, millennia, humans have used different kinds of substance. It's a question of, are they controlled? Are they balanced? And I think in our current consumer, commercialized, capitalist culture, we constantly get the message that if it feels good, you should do it. And if you feel bad, you should do something to feel good. Feeling bad is part of the human condition, and we have to learn how to deal with it. In our society, we're too quick to, I feel bad, take a drink, smoke a joint, take a pill, eat candy. We need to learn. This sounds very old-fashioned and austere, but I'm sorry. If we're going to lead productive, healthy lives, we need to figure out a way to deal with life without depending on substances. Not that they can't, in moderation, a glass of wine after dinner, or conceivably a joint, whatever. In moderation, they can be part of a healthy lifestyle. But it actually is going to undermine our families and our societies and our economy if we become too dependent on these substances.
Now, that these discussions have been going on since the founding of this country.
And in fact, one of the first things that we produced was tobacco in Virginia. And that's
and I remember
very
that. I remember
serious,
the time I tried that for the first time. I never tried it again.
I never did either. I took it all the way into my lungs. I was like, I thought I was going to die.
I went over there and I won't. So
anyway,
we got 4 minutes left.
Okay.
We probably shouldn't use it up.
Shouldn't?
We probably shouldn't.
Shouldn't? Okay.
You got one last comment? One quick comment you want to make?
Just that the education consolidation issue continues to be worked on. I have been trying to loosen the rules for merging districts without success.
Have they told you to piss off?
Yes, they are very pissed off at me, but that's always true, so that's okay.
That's okay.
But right now, I'm working on Senate Ed to see if they can loosen some of the rules, because I don't think the merger rules make a lot of sense in our area, and I think it could lead to people merging in ways that they will later regret, and I'm very concerned about that. So that's an issue that I'm working on, and there's going to be a meeting on the 27th in Arlington about the progress they're doing, exploring merger partners. I know Manchester is doing, so people need to read the news coverage, go to the meeting, know that that myself and Representative Barry, we are aware of these issues. We've been trying to get more room, but so far without success. So this may also become an election issue.
And remember to watch us out there on our website. We have a whole page devoted to all these meetings.
Yes.
But very quickly, 1 minute, very quickly, you may or may not get something changed, but let's assume you don't. This train is going.
Okay, I think that districts should engage in consolidation and mergers that make sense for educational and financial reasons. If it doesn't fix the Act 46 rules, they should ask for a waiver from the State Board of Education. If they don't get the waiver, in my personal opinion, they should sue, because an unelected, appointed board should not have the power to determine the future of democratically elected school boards. But that's me.
I think on that note, we'll call it a day. I'll see you in roughly a month, in May. In May will probably be the wrap-up show.
May 10th or May 12th or something.
Somewhere around there we'll have the
legislative end of session.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching. See you next time.